Hey everyone, in this video we're going to come back to our series on Latin verbs and we're looking at the different tenses. So specifically in this video we're going to look at the last tense, the future perfect tense, and we're going to explore how do we use it, how do we conjugate it, how do we translate it in English. And this, like I said, will finish off our series on looking at the 6 different tenses in the active voice, right? The indicative mood, active voice. And in future videos I'll give you more on things like the subjunctive mood or passive voice. We'll kind of take them all as they come, but for now this will set you up to at least be familiar with these tenses and be able to use them early on in your Latin career when you really see them and you're really sticking to what we call indicative mood and active voice. But to start the video, again, we want to just make sure that we have this idea of what a verb is, okay? So I've asked you this before, you've seen it in all my videos, just make sure you understand a verb is an action word, right? So we're trying to depict different actions. So things like running, skipping, jumping, typing, launching, whatever, they're all actions, okay? So what we're trying to get at is the timing of the verb. So when you talk about Latin verbs, remember they have 3 different pieces or aspects. They have tense, mood, and voice. And in this video, we're really talking about tense, okay? And we've talked in other videos how the tense of a Latin verb is the timing when it happens. So we're not changing the action, right? The action stays the same, running, skipping, jumping, whatever. We're changing the timing of when it happened. So I'd highly recommend that you go back. I made a video called What is a Tense, where I walked you through the 6 tenses, how they relate to each other, and just a general overview of what a tense is. That's where I'd direct you to just refresh your memory if you want. Just take a look at it. It'll explain everything that we've been kind of covering in this series on verbs, right, and tenses. So in this video, we really want to understand what's the future perfect tense. And to start, we want to look at this timeline, okay? So we've seen this before in some of my other videos. It's a very basic timeline, but it shows you the 6 tenses in relation to each other, okay? And when we're dealing with future perfect, it almost always goes with the pluperfect tense, which we did in one of our last videos, okay? So if you're thinking about how we can express actions, we're really specifically talking about the future. But the name future perfect implies something about the past tense, right? We're kind of blending past and future together, which might seem weird, but it actually does make sense if you think about it. So if you look at this timeline, right in the middle, we have the present tense, right? Everything to the left, we've covered, they all happen in the past. Okay. Everything to the right is in the future. These haven't happened yet. So the farthest you can go into the future, talking about things that will happen, is the future tense, right? I will walk later. Got it. But what if you had 2 different actions, right, that are going to happen? They haven't happened yet. They're both in the future. How do you tell which one happened first, right? This is where the future perfect comes into play. The future perfect is about showing an action that happened before another in the future. So if you see it here, it's right in between present and future. That's where we find future perfect. And you translate it as I will have done something. That's what we're going to dive into in this video. What is it? How do we use it? And really, what does it mean? Okay, so now that we have that background, let's get started. So again, the question I want to start with is what I just said before. We're talking about actions in the future. What if you have 2 actions that happen in the future? How do you know which one happened first? So let's say there's 2 different things about to happen today. 1, I will walk to school. Okay. 2, I will pet my dog. Okay. If I just say to you today, I will pet my dog and I will walk to school, you have no clue which one I'm going to do first, right? Am I petting my dog in the morning and then walking to school? Or am I going to walk to school and when I get home, I'm going to pet my dog? It's not entirely clear which one is going to happen first. And maybe it doesn't matter, right? You could keep it purposely vague and just say, yeah, I'm going to do both these things. It really doesn't matter. But if you wanted to tell your audience which one happened first, you need a specific tense. That's what the future perfect tense is, okay? So this slide is showing you that it's used to describe actions in the future that happen before other actions in the future. That's why we call it future perfect, right? Because it has that before sense to it. Sometimes we call this the past of the future, which might put your mind in a bit of a pretzel, so ignore that if that doesn't make sense. But it's basically what we wrote here. There's 2 things that are going to happen. One has to happen before the other. How do we sequence those out? We use the future perfect tense. And in English, we translate it as I will have done something. Right? I will have walked, I will have run, I will have jumped, whatever. Now, I'll be honest, future perfect, much like pluperfect, I mentioned in one of the other videos, it's kind of dying out in English. So not a lot of people actually use this anymore. We've kind of conflated it with the future tense. So people will say things like, today, after I will go to school, I will do this, right? They're both future tense, but by saying after, you're kind of setting up the future perfect, if that makes sense. You're telling which one came first without actually using future perfect tense. That's become much more common, right, as we've kind of condensed the the language down. So this might be something that you've never really thought about. Maybe you've never actually said, I will have done something, but you've been implying it your whole life. So even if you've never said, I will have blanked, right? You've actually been implying it as you speak about things in the future. So that's what we want to uncover in this video. How does it all work? Okay. And we want to start with our principal parts. So you've seen this a bunch of times in my videos, but remember, just regular non-deponent, just, normal Latin verbs have 4 pieces. Okay. And we talked about how the first 2 are what we use for what's called the present system. So from the first 2 principal parts, that's where we get the present, the imperfect, and the future tense. Okay. So in our example, audio audire is all I would need to conjugate that verb into present, imperfect, and future. On the other side, the 3rd and 4th principal part are what we call the perfect system, right? They create the perfect system. They give you the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect tense. Okay. So specifically, it's the 3rd principal part that we need here, right? When we're talking active voice. The 4th is more for passive voice, and we'll deal with that in another video. But for what we're doing right now, just future perfect tense, just normal active voice, indicative mood, if you know what that is. If not, don't worry about what I just said. But we're starting with that 3rd principal part, audivi, right? Just like we did for perfect and pluperfect, future perfect starts here. Okay. So if you condense it down, that's really all we need. Just audivi, the 3rd principal part, and we need the English definition, right, to here. That's all you need to make future perfect tense, okay? So step 1 is you go to that 3rd principal part and you drop the long I. You've seen this example a bunch of times now because perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect are all doing the same thing. They start with that perfect stem, the 3rd principal part without the long I. And again, just like with pluperfect tense, the future perfect has no bearing with conjugation. So in other words, what group or conjugation your verb is does not impact this at all. They all do the same thing. 3rd principal part, drop the long I. You don't have to worry about anything else. Okay, so there's no vowel flips, anything like that. Just get that perfect stem and you're off and running. Okay, which is good news for us, by the way. So once you have that stem, again, it's 3rd principal part, drop the long I. Now we have to add an ending to make it future perfect. Okay, so you might recall in pluperfect, we added on the imperfect form of essay. So in other words, we added eram, eras, era. For future perfect tense, we add the future form of essay, which is ero, eris, erit, eramis, eritus, erit. Okay, and that represents I, you, he, she, it, we, you, all, and they. Right, that's what you're really saying with these endings. You're telling who's doing it, and you're telling your listener, your reader, that it's future perfect tense. So what do I mean by this? Well, if we take audio audire again, that 3rd principal part is audivi. You drop the long I, and our stem over to the left would be audiv. Now we add on ero, eris, erit, and we have future perfect tense. So audiwero means I will have heard, right? Audiweris means you will have heard. Then you have audiwerit. Eramus, eritus, erin. You're saying he, she, it will have heard, we will have heard, you all will have heard, and they will have heard, right? It's pretty straightforward, and it's almost identical to pluperfect tense, right? Which is why we usually put these 2 tenses together in chapters and textbooks. They're pretty easy to understand when you put them together. The difference, though, is, again, you're using the future form of essay. So in other words, ero, eris, erit, instead of the imperfect of essay, which is what we did for pluperfect tense. Okay? So don't get too confused. It's a pretty simple process. 3rd principal part, drop the long I, add on ero, eris, erit, and you're off and running. Okay? So hopefully that idea makes sense. It's pretty much what we've been doing with perfect and pluperfect tense so far, right? This is why perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect go together in that perfect system. They all start in the same place. Okay? And specifically, pluperfect and future perfect look very similar and are basically expressing similar ideas. Okay? So just keep it all straight, practice, and you're going to be fine. Let's dive in with some examples. Okay, so I'm going to show you, and again, conjugation does not matter, but I'm going to show you different conjugation verbs just so you can feel comfortable with it. But again, it really doesn't matter what verb you use. No matter what you do, go to the 3rd principal part, drop the long I, add your ending. So if you had ambulare, a first conjugation verb, you take ambulavi, drop the long I, you add on ero, eris, erit, and there you go. You're off and running, right? I will have walked, you will have walked, he, she, it will have walked, and down the line. If we look at a second conjugation verb, sedeo, sedere, again, conjugation doesn't matter, but this just happens to be second conjugation. 3rd principal part is sedi. Drop the long I. You have sed, sed, as your stem. Add on ero, eris, erit, and again, you're ready to go. This means sedero means I will have sat. Eris would be you will have sat. He, she, it will have sat, and down the line. Okay. Here's a 3rd conjugation verb, skendere. Okay, and it's not third io because that first piece is just an O, not an io, right? Ascendo. So it's just a third conjugation verb. Go to the third principal part, ascendi, drop the long I, add on ero, eris, erit, and you're good to go. It's I will have climbed, you will have climbed, he, she, it will have climbed. The next verb we're looking at is a third io, just to, again, prove to you that conjugation doesn't matter. You go right to that third principal part, aripui, drop the long I, add on ero, eris, erit, and you get aripuero, I will have seized, aripueris, you will have seized, and so on and so on. Okay. The last one we're going to look at is a fourth conjugation verb. You go to that third principal part, skiwi, drop the long I, add your endings, ero, eris, erit, and you're all set. So skiwero means I will have known. Then you have you will have known, he, she, it will have known, we, you, all, and they. Okay, so I know that's very repetitive and it's meant to be just to show you that there's nothing to really worry about here. But if you want to condense it into a couple of simple steps or a chart, this is, again, an infographic that I give to my students just so they can kind of keep it all in one place. It's walking you through the steps for future perfect tense. So if you want to pause the video, take a screenshot, feel free. If you'd rather have it, I'd be happy to send it to you. Just let me know in the comments. Doesn't make a difference to me. But this type of chart just shows you kind of in a simple way what you do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, you're off and running. And you just have some examples down below too, along with a translation. So it's kind of everything in one place just to make sure that you're feeling pretty good. Okay. To help you out with this, again, pro tip, I've shown you this in the past couple of videos, high pause. This is his video on perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect tense. Why did he put them together? Because like I said, they form the perfect system, so they're doing similar things. So now you can finally watch this video in its entirety, in all its glory, and understand what he's saying in each of these columns for the 3 different tenses. But again, I'd highly recommend that you watch this or something like it. There's others out there, but anytime you can set something to music, particularly if you can make it a weird video, no offense to High Pause, this is a super weird video, but the weirdness kind of sticks in your mind. So I would highly recommend you watch it, enjoy it. The more you watch it, the more it's going to just burn into your brain for better or worse, and you'll feel more comfortable with this. The real pro tip, the bonus pro tip, is Magistrula. I know, and I've said this, a few times now, but Magistrula to me is one of the easiest ways to just get mass repetition on this. Okay, and it depends on what you want to do or kind of what your teacher is telling you to do in class. If you want to just conjugate and rattle off, future perfect tense over and over again, just conjugating it out, like I will have done this, you will have done this down the line. All you have to do is hit the charts button, right? The charts, you can set it for conjugation. You can set it specifically for future perfect tense, and you'll be off and running. You can do that as many times as you want where you're giving the Latin along with the English. I'd probably recommend that you do sentence translation, either to go along with your charts, maybe after you've done a few charts so you feel really comfortable. Go to where it says sentences, and this is where Magistrula will spit out sentences to you using future perfect tense. You can set it to specifically use that tense. You can also change how difficult you want the sentences to be. Personally, I think it's much better to see the Latin kind of in context. And I know sometimes Magistrula has sort of screwy sentences, but that's fine. If you can just read through them, translate, I think that's easier to do rather than just seeing charts over and over again and memorizing them. But either way, Magistrula will let you do both. I highly recommend you do it. And again, I don't own Magistrula. I actually don't know the teacher who makes it. I'm just a huge fan. So there you go. Use it. It's free. Do what you got to do, but I'd recommend that you use it. Okay. So now we can recap everything we just spoke about. So a quick recap of the future perfect tense. Again, it represents actions in the future that happen before other future actions. Okay, so when you see sentences involving future perfect, usually there'll be 2 verbs. One will be future and one will be future perfect. You're expressing that the future perfect verb happens first. So an example would be something like, by the time I will graduate high school, I will have passed Latin class, right? First, you need to pass Latin class, and then you need to graduate high school, right? Hopefully. But that's the idea. You're sequencing them. You're saying future perfect happened first, okay? Which is why we call it future perfect, okay? The future perfect tense, to form it, you go to the third principal part, and you drop that long I. Then you add on the future tense form of esse, right? Ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritus, erit. That's all you add. And the translation is going to be will have. You've heard me say that a bunch of times in the video, but I will have done this. You will have done that. That's your translation. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. Again, future perfect, it usually goes with pluperfect. They're very similar to each other, so I'd recommend kind of watching these videos back to back just so you can see the repetition of it. But it's nothing you need to be afraid of. Maybe you haven't heard of this tense before, or you don't really speak this way. That's fine. In Latin, it is important because the tense really does show you what we said here, which action happened first. So it's important that you understand it in the Latin. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty straightforward. It's usually something my students handle pretty well. So just practice it. The more you can do, reading your textbook or whatever you're using in class. Read as much as you can, see it in context. The more you read and practice, the better off you're going to be. Okay, good luck with it. If you have any questions at all, let me know. I'll be happy to help. But otherwise, just keep practicing and you should be fine.